Going round and round and round and round. Person's not there yet. Well, maybe they will be there in a moment. Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Talking Niagara. Good morning, Mike Cushman. As always, bright and early, watching on YouTube, and welcome everybody. So, Dave, how is it this morning? How are you doing?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm doing much better this morning. I've been sick for the last couple of days. I don't think I'm over it yet, but wow, what a difference. This morning I feel much better. Still coughing a little bit, kind of achy still, but quite a bit of difference from yesterday.
Are you going to have a day with your friends today?
I don't know if I can. Like right now, I'm kind of very reluctant if I should join them because I don't know how contagious I am,
Yeah.
And but I can join. I think I'll probably, if things keep going this way, I'll be able to join them tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I guess what you've got is one of these 48-hour colds, right?
Maybe, but it was a killer.
Because you're a bit older, it takes 72 hours to die.
Oh, there! I still got a trace of it there.
Plenty of hot water, my friend.
Yeah. Well,
hot water is apparently the cure.
Well, if I had plenty of hot water yesterday, I might have drowned myself.
Okay. So the Chinese have been, boasting that this trade agreement with the US is a victory.
The Chinese are.
Yeah.
Yes, of course they are, because they're number one. In order for them to talk, to get anywhere, their number one thing was to get rid of those tariffs.
Yeah.
Which is, we're not going to talk unless you get rid of those tariffs. And Trump says, well, Xi's got to phone me. Xi's got to phone me, and I don't see it as a sign of weakness if he phones me. What happened was the Americans saw the state of the Chinese economy and thought that it was bad enough that they could play their game, right? Let's ladle on these tariffs. Let's put a lot of pain on them, and they'll fold because they need us more than them. Well, the Chinese says, well, if you want to play tough, we could play tough too. We can make sure that your shelves got nothing on them, that especially around Christmas time and all that. We can do that. We'll suffer the pain. You'll suffer the pain. See who bends first. In the meantime, nobody talks. No talks are going to happen unless those tariffs come off. So they had this little meeting in Switzerland, like we predicted right here on the show. It's going to be on neutral territory. There's not going to be a Trump and Xi get together.
Yeah.
So they had a little talk, and behind closed doors, the Chinese says, you want to keep talking, you remove the tariffs. And that's what they did. It says, you remove yours and we'll remove ours. And then we'll get to a point where we were before, and then we can make a few things, right? So the Chinese kept some of their tariffs on certain things. The Americans did on steel and aluminum and certain things, but 95% of it's now back to where it was. And
basically typically on average about 30%, which is about where most tariffs would be in such a deal over time.
Yeah, the tariffs now, that means the American people are going to pay 30% more for anything that was made in China.
They've probably been paying that 30% anyway.
They have been already paying the 20. I'm not sure if it's 30, but they've been paying the 20% that was already on, and then they pay the additional.
Yeah, this 30% is average. Some products are a bit higher than others, all right? Because they're saying, basically there are certain things that you will get where the tariffs are exactly the same as they were before.
Yeah, so pretty much you got exactly where you wanted to be. Anyway, this all could have happened without all of this
Yeah,
hoofah.
yeah.
Uh,
And in fact, I'm starting to wonder. There's a couple of things that have gone on here now. Now they've struck the deal. Now stock market's basically going back to normal. Starting to head back to normal. So plunging the stock market was a way get your money out. If the stock market goes back to normal, now you make billions, don't you? Because you've got to pick up all those losses. And the stock market will get back to where it was at the beginning, well beyond where it was at the beginning of the year.
well, it depends how much damage is being done, and other factors as well. War is another factor. Now, what Trump hasn't really done that well with the tariff thing, except that he's got the Chinese talking.
No, but he has got everybody in the world is now on the phone to Trump. You know what I mean?
Yeah, even Lesotho, the country where
Yeah.
nobody heard of.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is each one of these countries is signing up for Starlinks.
Yeah.
Even little Lesotho, who could hardly afford a postage stamp, has committed to Starlinks because they think that's the way to in to Trump. We'll go and we'll buy Starlinks for our satellite needs, and because Elon Musk is close to Trump, that's our in. We can start negotiations saying, look what we did. We got Starlinks.
But can Lesotho afford Starlinks?
They will commit to as much as they can, and that's their way of sort of buying their way onto the negotiating buying favorability at the negotiating table. And other countries have done
I don't know the budget of Lesotho, but it occurs to me that their budget is a lot less than Canada, a lot less than even Luxembourg, right?
Well, it's a tiny budget, and but of course they got to find a way out of this. I mean, they got a 40 something 45% tariff on them, and that was like weird kind of a calculation they came up with. So tiny Lesotho that's got diamonds that the United States wants, and the United States looks at little Lesotho and says, hey, you're not buying the same what we're buying. So we're buying a lot of very expensive diamonds from you and then adding value to them, but you're not buying anything from us. Nobody says, well, they can't buy anything from you because they don't have any money and they're poor, but you want their diamonds. So you're going like, there's a situation where a trade imbalance is just fine because Lesotho can't afford anything you make, but you want their diamonds. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to buy their diamonds. You don't lose value, you add value. That's the trouble with this whole tariff idea. Even with our oil, as Pierre Poilievre pointed out, our raw oil goes down there at a discount, 20% discount. And they add value to the oil. They add value to the oil, some of which is exported. Yeah. So they make money off of buying our oil. It's really hard to say, oh, well, we're losing there. When you buy something and you add value to it, you refine the oil, then you add value to it. It's just like the United Kingdom, right? Back in the days when it was the fabric capital of the world, where it had looms. It needed cotton, right?
Yeah,
it needed cotton. So it's going to buy all kinds of cotton from Egypt. Do you think it's going to sell a whole lot of that of its cloth back to Egypt? No. It's going to sell at other places. So it has a trade imbalance with Egypt because it has to buy the cotton, but then it takes that cotton.
And probably the Egyptians couldn't afford the products made with their own cotton anyway.
You see, and that's just an example where cotton was bought. There's going to be a trade imbalance between Egypt and Britain, but Britain knows it takes the cotton and adds value to it and sells it and makes much more money than it did buying it.
Yeah.
It makes a huge profit on it. So
yeah. And probably in that particular example that you're giving, it's probably making hundreds of percentile profit on it.
sure. And the same thing as our oil going down to the States, they add a whole lot of value to it. So they buy it and they make profit off of it.
Yeah.
So you have to add that into the calculation when
And
you're adding a return.
at the end of the day, my prediction is that if you wind the clock forward a year or so, other than one or two basic issues, I think you'll end up with a tariff picture pretty much the same as it is right now. But what you've gotten is now this situation where every country is now negotiating with the United States over everything.
Look
And
at
they have to
what
do it on
Mike
a
put here.
day-to-day. Yeah.
What Mike put here, he has accomplished nothing but sending the markets all over so his friends could make billions. I don't doubt that a lot of people made billions.
I don't doubt it at all.
And
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. And the other, so I think that the other thing that's happening here is it means that every government leader now has to tread a fine line. And it's like, before we do anything, let's ask Donald Trump's permission.
I'm not so sure about that, but they will definitely. I don't know. I do what about what?
About anything to do with international trade.
Oh well, yeah. But Trump doesn't know anything. It's his
No,
people.
I know, but it's the point is Donald Trump wants to be king of the world.
Yeah, he wants to be God.
Yeah, exactly.
But
And
on
this
the
is
other
his
hand,
way of doing it.
let me just back it up a bit. I was listening to Jeffrey Sachs the other day, and on the more positive note for Trump. Now he's usually a Trump critic, but he sees some positive developments in the way Trump is finally getting to the crux of the deal in Ukraine. So he's seeing that the way Trump has been dealing with Putin and Zelensky somehow is working out in a more positive way. And he even sees that Trump shutting out Netanyahu lately, making private deals with Hamas to get the American soldier out of American soldier being hostage being released, American Jewish or American Israeli soldier being released, independent negotiations with Hamas, and the independent negotiations with Houthi, which did not include the Israelis. He sees that there might be a path forward for the Palestinians. Oddly enough, at least Trump is creating a window there. So there are certain things that we can. He says that are potentially positive. So we'll find out about that. So, like, we want to diss Trump every which way, but there may be, he may have something on the go over there. At least that's what Sachs says. And he's usually a pretty astute observer of geopolitics, in my mind, anytime I listen to him.
Yeah. And as you say, you kind of pay attention when the person who's making the commentary is not exactly what you call a Trump fan.
Exactly. Yeah. And he's generally speaking a Trump critic. Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of does help you kind of put things in perspective. Yeah. Okay. So moving on to our situation. So buying local sentiment could boost the farmers market. But I have to question how much of this article is just purely and simply because hype for the fact that the farmers market opens on May the 17th.
I don't know. I think it's a good idea. it's a way of it's a good way of announcing that the thing
Yeah.
that farm market is going to open. Once it goes back to the McBain Center, I don't think you're going to have any trouble getting people out there. It was a pipe dream to have it in at the Exchange. Basically, that didn't really work out that well. Not enough parking, not enough room. So the McBain Center is much better location, much more room, and yes, I think there's going to be more people coming out to buy local because of what's happening, and I certainly would, but then again, I go to the grocery store and look for what's local in there. They quite often have local, and I'll buy local stuff.
Oh, I'm not knocking buying local. Don't get me wrong. I'm not having a go at buying local. It's just this whole thing. Of course, the farmers market is local. Well, it is and it isn't, because the farmers market isn't what you would call a real market. I remember a market when I was a kid. My mum, dad used to take us to the market on a Saturday afternoon often, and all the veggies were up for there would be deals on on all the veggies, on the fruits and things like that. That was the thing about the market. The market was primarily real food, right? It was, it was all about food. Yeah, there were other things like cloth and things like that you could buy in the market, but not, that wasn't especially the deal of the market. We don't have markets like that anymore.
No, well, farmers market's pretty good that way. I mean, you get local farmers and people out there doing their thing. I thought that's pretty.
They're not always selling local produce, though.
It's
for
designed,
example, many of them
are mostly local.
Yeah, mostly, but there's often, for example, if they're opening. Yeah, obviously, if any market, and the St. Catherine's farmers market is open from February to December, as far as I can work out. And they're selling, for example, you can go buy bananas any time of the year, but of course they're not local. But you can buy peaches this time of year, but many of them are not local either.
Oh, well, they would be from the northern United States, probably, or maybe from Chile or whatever. I don't know,
Yeah.
but.
More likely to be
what about our market? Do you see a whole lot of that? I don't see a whole lot of that in our market, in our farmers market. I see debris. I see the other.
The last time I've been to the Niagara Falls farmers market, they were the same vendors as in St. Catherine's.
Well, the last time I didn't see anything, at least as far as produce, that was offshore. It was all local.
Mm. Yeah, I'm still seeing it, anyway. It's just I guess I'm being cynical.
I guess I think it's
I'm looking at
most of the stuff there is local. Most of it, like that has been my impression. Anytime I've gone there, it came out of the farms in and around them.
I like the soap vendors. I like the honey vendors and all those kinds of things. And the local arts and craft vendors. There's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, well, I usually ignore all that. I go, I get the samosas, and because I know the Ethiopian lady that makes those.
Yeah, samosas. I know the lady you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So her and I, I used to mentor her a bit in Toastmasters. She's working too hard. She can't come out to Toastmasters the last couple of years anyway. But so B is her name. Yeah. Anyway, so the samosas and apples, of course, I zero on apples and fruit and vegetables. I'm a fruit and vegetable maniac, so it's a good place for a guy like me, and almost everything I'm buying there, it's all local, and it's seasonal too. So you can't get you get local tomatoes when local tomatoes come out. You'll get or less unless they're hothouse tomatoes. Then you can get them any time of year. So that kind of thing. So
well, I think most of the tomatoes we get are actually local hothouse tomatoes anyway.
Yeah, it's easy to grow them,
Yeah.
and they're pretty good. So,
And the same with cucumbers. Most of them are local, grown in greenhouses.
well, just as an aside, I didn't see this whole thing or read about the whole thing. I can't remember an article. An article I was reading. It's about machine farming, and somebody has set up, and I forget where. I wish I paid. I was just in passing. I was looking at this article as I was doing stuff else. There is a machine farm basically where they have all your goods, all the production goods, all set up, and a machine takes care of them. Adds just enough water, adds
Yeah.
just enough
Yeah.
nutrition, has just enough light.
It's called vertical farming.
Well,
And you can make it like in a factory.
Well, this one wasn't stacked, so it wasn't
Yeah.
going
Okay.
up. I'm not so sure how experimental it was, but it was kind of like in a big building. It looked like in a kind of a greenhouse affair, but all the plants and everything were about waist height, so they were easy to get at, and everything was grown exactly to the exact nutritions that the plant had to have, the exact kind of light conditions and everything, and the yield apparently was extraordinary. So you could think of even going way up to the Antarctic or the Arctic, basically,
Well,
and
some people,
under reasons, and you could make one of these things, set it up, and you could grow anything you wanted all year long.
yeah. And
The
people have
initial
been talking
outlay,
about,
the initial capital outlay would be huge.
yeah.
But once that's done, the productivity level would be like you get bumper crops every time. So
Yeah, and people have been talking about dome farming for a long time, actually, where you can kind of have these domes that are essentially out there, and you can kind of produce everything you need in the dome. If you live there, you're self-sufficient. Plus, plus you sell enough as well.
yeah, so
And as you say, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be in particularly warm climates. It can be in outside. It's snow covers your dome, and they're fine.
well, yeah. So that kind of thing's been going on for a while, but this was a kind of like a different innovation in that same thing.
Well,
So that's
yeah,
why
I think.
it got room as an article. It was it seems to be a bit of an entrepreneurial thing. I wish I remembered more of the article, and this guy come up with it, and it seems to be a bit of the future, because you can understand there are places in the world you cannot grow things.
Yeah.
And if you set up something like this after the initial capital outlay, then it's just a matter of maintaining the nutrients, the water, all that kind of thing, and the light levels. And you could always have
Well, the light levels are interesting. Light levels are interesting. We got a lamp at home here that actually is good for light levels. We'll basically produce sunlight quality light, but it's not as bright as sunlight. And you can set it for like 12 hours a day.
Yeah, that's a sun lamp.
Yeah, it's a sun lamp. Yeah. Well, in fact, actually, these are like like an octopus style sun lamp, if you know what I mean. Those individual legs have got light on them.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. But that's but you could think of some
pepper jams, yeah, that have had them. Yeah.
Okay, we've got Donna Attridge. Is that her name? I can't read it. Even if it's offshore at farmers market, you're still supporting a smaller, more local sized business rather than helping a big box store chain's profit off imported produce. Yeah, quite right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure like a lot of the smaller farmers, if they if they don't have local tomatoes at that particular time, they might buy offshore tomatoes. They're going to have to be pretty careful, though. They're going to have to buy Chilean tomatoes or Mexican tomatoes, not American tomatoes, until this trade war is all over.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'd like to see a return to like a greengrocer, the traditional greengrocer, the traditional butcher, the traditional baker, that type of thing. We still got good bakers around here, by the way.
You'll never see it. You won't see it.
I know that's the trouble. That's part of the trouble.
Because each different butcher, you take a butcher and he sets up. That's a lot of initial outlay for the butcher. Whereas if it's incorporated into a big store, the big like Sobeys or whatever can hire their butcher or centralize an area where they have butchers and buy butchered meat, like from Maple Leaf Mills or something like that. Yeah. So it's just too cost prohibitive to have that individual grocer and that individual butcher or fishmonger. I would like to see a good fish market, but I mean, fish is so expensive now. Holy smokes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Moving on. St. Lawrence Seaway is reporting strong cargo shipments so far this season.
Well, that's a good sign right off the bat. They're up 3.7% from where they last year. So that sounds really good. But these shipments probably took off before the initial shockwaves of the tariffs. So we don't know for sure what's going to happen yet. But what I do find here, however, it says here, despite ongoing global economic insecurities, the 67th navigable season, Yahoo, way to go. That's the new Welland Canal. The old Welland Canal dates way back. That's the new Welland Canal.
Yeah.
67 years of the new Welland Canal. So 4.5 million tons of cargo moved. That was pretty cool. 3.7 increase. But what's the thing that I don't like?
Grain shipments are up 22%.
That's great. But what I didn't like was iron ore and coal are down.
Dropped 24%.
So what does that tell you? That tells you that there's less demand at the steel mill.
Yeah.
That's a considerable amount.
Yeah.
That means they're counting on making less steel. They're going to have to work out what's going on between the Americans right now.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, so grain is going up, liquid bulk is going up, dry bulk is going up. So those sort of things, which are mainly agricultural, are on the rise. But the real value in most things is going to come from iron ore and coal, the industrial produce. And iron ore is down 24%, coal down 28%. And general cargo, the general industrial cargo, has decreased by 18%.
Yeah, so it's on the surface, it sounds good. It's up 3.7%, but some of the more critical elements there are down, particularly iron ore and coal. Iron ore and coal means less steel. The steel means less steel output. That means more steel workers getting laid off.
And iron ore and steel are kind of the mainstay of the St. Lawrence waterway, aren't they?
Iron ore and steel is a big thing. Grain is another thing. Like Western grain coming through is a big thing.
Oh, I know.
Iron ore and steel coming back and coal going back and forth is a big deal too. The steel mill on the Lake Erie Works, Stelco Lake Erie Works. There's a port there where there's a port there where the lime and the iron ore pellets and the coal all get dropped off there and get conveyed into the blast furnace eventually. Same thing for Stelco and Hamilton. They have places there where they offload their coal, where they make coke out of it, and then use that for the steel making process.
Well, actually, an interesting thing was I saw an article last week, and I didn't clip it much like the one you was talking about. Somebody was boasting about having fixed the electric smelting process.
Fixed it?
It made it successfully implemented electronic smelting rather than smelting via.
Well, let's make this clear. There's always been there for a very long time. There's been electric steel smelters.
Yeah,
there has been where there's ample amounts of,
but they're not as
amounts of
successful.
power. Where there's ample amounts of power, you can smelt steel with electricity, arc furnaces. But the quality of that steel is not as good.
Well,
it cannot be used in all the steel that comes from it cannot be as utilized as the steel from a blast furnace.
What they're basically saying is that they've managed to actually improve the quality of that steel.
Well, they're still far off.
Still.
Yeah. So basically, the problems with smelting steel.
I should have gotten you the article because I saw it and I saw some discussion on it and went, yeah, that's interesting. Dave will like that, and then completely forgot all about sending you it.
Yeah. Well, as far as the steel that comes from electric smelters can be only used in certain applications.
They're saying now that they've broken through to a wider use, is what
possibly, but still, it would take a long time before investment will follow that up. I
grant that, yeah.
And the number one issue is availability of power. If you have a smelter like a blast furnace that uses coke, you don't need electric power. You have all the heat and power you need. It's all self-contained. Yeah. What you do is you use like the Bessemer system, and basically a basic oxygen furnace where you blast it with oxygen and remove the impurities that way. So electric smelting of iron and making of steel. Remember, you have to add if you're going to make steel, it needs carbon. So the carbon in steel comes from the coke, but the carbon in electric steel would have to be added. Or other alloys added.
Yeah,
remember, steel comes in a million of different alloys.
I understand what you're saying. It's not an area that I have any expertise on, so I'd be deferring to you in such a conversation anyway.
Well, just so happened, a buddy of mine that worked 35 years in the steel mill was a foreman there, and so he and I had a talk about that about a week or two ago, and he was pointing that out that they still need that, like the electric stuff still hasn't come up to the level where the steel can be as utilized in as many places as the steel made in a blast furnace. Not yet. And of course, the number one issue is power. The same problem aluminum smelters have. Why doesn't the United States have any more aluminum smelters? How come they're down to 6 when they used to have 30, 32 or something like that? They're down to 6 and they're low capacity. It's because they don't have a high degree of extra electrical power like Quebec does. Quebec has enormous amounts of hydroelectric power, and what it doesn't have, it brings in from Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yeah,
that's why you have aluminum smelters there. Yeah. And that's the primary reason why Algoma and other American smelters, aluminum makers, move their production to places where there is power. So yeah, it sounds good. We can reduce the amount of coal and carbon we put into the air by using electric furnaces to make steel, but not likely unless you find a source of making a lot of power. And if you're going to make that power with a coal generated power station, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Where's the, like,
That's
you can have
that's
your
the
you can have
purpose
your
of
electric,
coke.
yeah, you could have your electric steel smelter or iron smelter right there, and right beside it a coal plant providing the electricity. So there's a lot of things to think about when you think of that. But yeah, they've made a lot of advances in steel smelting. Basically, it's the same way they did it 1000 BC. When you looked at King Tutankhamun's grave goods, one of the most valuable things there was an iron sword, I think it was, which would have been at 1400 would have been extremely rare and extremely expensive. And that was like still well into the Bronze Age. The Iron Age had not even popped up its head, but the fact that there was only one in his grave tells you that it was probably an extremely expensive article.
Yeah.
But from the beginning, steel smelting is pretty much the same as it always has been. Add the Bessemer process, and then add more modern, it's basically heat up the iron ore with a coke, and some of the carbon from that coke gets into the steel. And if you work it right and blow a lot of air on it, then you can refine it well, and then you've got steel.
Yeah.
And if you then some guy by the name of Bessemer there were advances made in that process in England during the late 18th century, and again in the early 19th century. The early 19th century sees the Bessemer process. Suddenly, you have a lot of Bessemer process comes in, and suddenly you got a lot of steel, cheap.
That was the foundation of Sheffield, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Because Sheffield was a steel city in England, and the foundation of that was much to do with that developing process.
Yeah, so there's a lot to be had down there. So the electrical smelting is fine, but it really depends on availability of power.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Talking about power and availability, I think there's a couple that actually some people that seem to need some common sense, and that is the Canada Post and the Union that seem to be on a death wish course right now.
Yeah, the opinion piece there was pretty much what everybody's been thinking.
It's by the Toronto Sun, so obviously that puts it in perspective.
Yeah, right? For instance, it's not going to be on the side of unions. Obviously, it's going to be on the side of the capitalist swine.
Well, but the interesting thing is they talk about here, and this is actually the point where Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses. So they were talking about the tempting thing would be to shut down Canada Post, and that would have consequences. But that would have consequences because the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses say the last postal strike cost small and medium-sized businesses more than $1 billion. Such as millions of parcels and letters that were idle during their Christmas season.
Yeah. I do. They really want to shoot themselves in the foot. But this article is saying what everybody has been saying right from the very beginning. You're threatening a strike starting May 22nd. You're in a position where you can resume your strike. Do you really want to resume your strike?
Yeah.
Right now, the Canadian, according to this opinion piece, and I'm sure it's heavily leaning towards the capitalist swine and away from the true blue union worker, who is just maintaining the sound basis of this country with good union morals and fair pay for all, while the capitalist swine tries to eat up everybody's lunch.
Yeah, but remember, the post office is more it's a self-sustaining public service, isn't it?
Yeah. So the truth of it is, how much can it sustain itself? It talks about letters. The
Well,
average household got 7 letters back in 2008, and as of last year or so, the average household got like 2.
yeah.
If you have a
Okay.
drop in the amount of letters going out to everyone, of course you're going to need a drop in manpower.
Yeah. And actually, you would think, okay, so what's the vast majority of letters that you get comes from often from government agencies like the CRA. Other letters come from banks and credit cards. Um, nobody writes. Nobody writes. Dear Aunt Jemima anymore. Your letters to your favorite aunt and uncle are done by email these days, aren't they? Or text message
Yeah. So
or
almost every,
Skype.
yeah, you don't write letters anymore. Very, very rare. I think the last one I wrote was last year, and I hadn't wrote one. I don't think I've written a letter 2 years before that. Yeah, writing a letter is a lost art right now. It's sad.
Yeah.
It's very sad. But let's face it, in one email, you could put a whole lot of detail in it and send it immediately.
But I have to put my hand up on this one, Dave. In 1962, I never wrote letters to my grandma either.
In 1962.
Well, maybe a bit later than that, but you know what I mean. And when I was young, everybody said, "Oh, you should write letters to your grandma." And like I sit there with a blank piece of paper, and I would say, "Hi, grandma. Bye, grandma," and that's my letter.
Well, that's even now when I got my boys to go visit my mom and stuff like that, I try to be with them when they're there, or they go in a group because what do you talk to your grandmother about?
Yeah,
You know, what do you talk to her about? You know, you could talk to what's on the news or something like that, but you don't. So quite often I get her to talk about what it was like when she was a little kid or something like that. But yeah, so that's always been a problem anyway. So basically, just think of anything to talk to grandma about. That's my advice for anybody out there that's visiting grandma, don't know what to talk about. Get grandma to talk about her
But
life or
yeah.
talk about any old thing. She's just happy to have the company.
And these days, I think you're more seeing grandma on WhatsApp or Messenger or something like that, than you are through anything. You're not texting her anymore. You're not. You're not. You're generally doing it by a once a week call on WhatsApp.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what to follow up with that. I think basically, though, Canada Post
Yeah.
will shoot itself in the foot if it goes on strike. It will
Yeah.
kill whatever leftover business it has.
Yeah.
It has already seen some business move
Well,
away from it during the last strike.
yeah.
If they do it
Exactly.
again, the government will have no choice but to say, what's the point of even having this
Yeah.
service?
There was some speculation in the December strike that you think about it, and I'm not saying specifically Amazon, but companies like Amazon have these distribution networks that could operate both ways. All right, so they could pick up. You could put something in your mailbox and put a flag up for when the Amazon guy comes by who picks up your prepaid parcel and
Yeah,
drop it through the Amazon network, because that you think about it, you get Amazon on next day delivery. Amazon is hundreds of percentage points more efficient than the post office. I'm not recommending we get rid of the post office, but I'm just saying, I'm just
well,
intimating reality.
post office still supplies inexpensive postal service to small businesses. It's still a
Yeah.
whole lot cheaper than the private courier stuff.
Well, yeah,
It's
exactly,
important.
because
It's important. But the
yeah,
problem here is what the article is saying. If you do not have reliability, if your customer, your that little business that requires like like once I heard about a seed company, right? A seed company sends out all its seeds at certain times of the year to people who do their farming and so on.
Yep.
And if they don't get those seeds out in time, then it's no good. And they can't, if they can't rely on the Canada Post to get them out there, then they could shoot them, like their business could be done. So and they rely on the inexpensive postal service.
That's a perfect example, actually, Dave, because the seed has to go out. The seeds go out in a particular, let's say, 2-week period, and if those seeds are delayed, the difference is that when you, the small business farmer who's going to plant those seeds, lays them out onto the grounds to plant them, if it's delayed by 2 weeks, you get zero product.
Yeah, and you're talking about everything here. You're talking about gardeners who have flower gardens, and people who have vegetable gardens and all that. And so you can imagine if there's a strike and those seeds are being withheld, and the seeds are stuck in the postal system during a strike. That could kill that business. And they rely on inexpensive postal service to get their stuff out there. Do you really? The more you go on strike, the more you threaten on strike, that little business now has to eat the cost of sending them through a different courier, a more expensive one will cut into their profits, add the expense of the seed onto the people who are buying it. And that's all because, not because they don't want to send it through Canada Post, but because they can't rely on Canada Post to be reliable.
Yeah, and I have an example of that one, is that in part of what we do, we send letters out, and we often send them by registered post. We register post it's about $13. When the postal strike was on, I had to go to UPS, it was $39.
You see, yeah. So the post office still has a very good place there. The problem is, how do you then, when the postal workers see the strain that's on them, they can tell that that postal levels are down. They know that there's going to have to be cuts. They don't want to see them because the post office is not making money and it's costing the taxpayer a lot more money than it should. So there's definitely going to be cutbacks. How do you redesign that? How do you redesign the postal service that can reliably service these markets like the one you're talking about, and be trusted to get the letter there without having to go on strike? So
basically they're saying,
it's going to have to be like the post office, the union, and the government are going to have to get together and say, look, we want to keep as many jobs as we can. We're going to try to keep the post office as alive as best we can for those areas of the economy that really need it. But let's face it, it has to be cut back unless we can, and we cannot. In order to keep what we do have, we have to be sure that those the people who rely on the post have faith in the post. Well, if they go on strike, they shoot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, and here it says, right, in 2006, 5.5 billion letters were sent. In 2023, it was 2.2 billion letters, so about a third of what it was back in 2006. And if you think about it, our firm, we maybe get at work, we get maybe actually, I'm going to say we probably get 1.6 letters per day. 1.6 letters per day, when in fact, go back even 5 years, we probably had a 3-inch bundle of letters come in every day. Pre-pandemic, pre-pandemic to now is a whole heap different, because what we get, the 1.6 letters per day doesn't include court notices, doesn't include court communiques, doesn't include communiques with third parties, because guess what? All of that's done by email these days. Nobody does it by post anymore.
Well, there is a place for Canada Post. The
Oh, I
problem is
agree.
it has to be a trustworthy carrier. And if it says it's going to go on strike because it uses its largest weapon is a public strike, that would have worked in 1980, but it's not going to work today.
Yeah.
Because if you go on strike, you reduce the amount. You may win the strike, you may get what you want, but you will lose a certain amount of your post because people will go look for a private company that is not at risk of going on strike.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
got to be somebody's got to use their mind here and find out how can we save as much of Canada Post as we can, and how can we show everyone
And,
that
and
we're as good a
maybe,
carrier as anyone else.
yeah, and maybe what we do is we put the letter deliveries down to 3 days a week.
Yeah, I don't know what you take. Yeah, make the routes bigger. Well, already like the guys' routes are bigger than they ever used to be because of the volume of mail. So they combined a lot of routes. Like at
Yeah,
one
I
time,
know they
I
have.
had a
I
route,
know.
and he'd have 2 bags of he'd have a couple bags of mail every day, one for the afternoon, one for the morning, one for the afternoon, and then those then he had less and less mail, so they would expand the size of the route. And
Well, the other thought that has been going into this is that you actually have differing ways of, because of the longer routes and smaller numbers, smaller numbers of carriers per postal service area, that you're going to actually have things like scooters and other methods to get around, so they're not walking extra mileage.
well, look, that is neither here nor there. Really, what it is basically the article is basically if they go on strike, they will shoot themselves in the foot. And I agree.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
agree. Even if they have the right to do it, even if they are not being able to resolve their differences with the government right now, and they want to use that heavy card, the last and heavy card they have, their ace in the hole may be the ace that kills them
Yeah.
if they go on strike.
Yeah.
Because what they need to do is build confidence in the customer level. I don't think you'll find a postal strike after this year. I don't think you'll find another postal strike at all, because if they have already lost some business from the last strike they had, and if they go on strike this time, the government will find all kinds of reasons to cut jobs all over the place, because the government has already done some looking into this and sees that the postal service as is untenable. It is a taxpayer burden.
Yeah.
So somebody's got to figure out how do you make the post office better and cheaper, like it's supposed to be for the average person, and at the same time pay your postal workers a fair price, fair wage.
Yeah.
Now, if they go on strike again, they are going to really shoot themselves in the foot, because what that means is there's going to be less mail volume because there'll be less confidence in the postal system.
Yeah. Why would I even think about using the post? I'll go to that 39 buck UPS every time.
Yes,
And
and
the
can you,
irony
can you then,
here
can,
is
then
that,
can you, if they do sign, say, a 5-year deal, can you trust that 5-year deal? Are they going to wobble somewhere in between?
yeah.
So
Well,
basically, I
and
think what
especially if,
the government and the union have got together, and this is what I propose for all unions and big business, is put a union member on the board of directors. That way, you can you can help resolve a lot of issues by having someone on the table, because it's of the union's interest and the company's interest that the company is healthy, and if you have a union member on the board like they do in Europe, then that CEO that works for the union can come back to the union and say, look, there are difficulties ahead. There are supply chain problems, this and that. This is not the time to ask for a wage increase. A little later on, that CEO can come back and say, now this is a very good time for wage increase because we see that business will be exploding and expanding. So now is the time of wage increase. And I think the same thing's got to happen with the union members of the Canadian, the postal union. You're going to have to get your people
when you have to deal with
in the room with the government and look at the figures they see and try to devise a method by which you could stay relevant for the future.
Exactly, and they have to deal with the declining numbers of things being sent, you know. But they also have to take into consideration what the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses are saying about about what the impact of the strike.
Yes. Yeah. So there you have it.
Yeah. And because it's actually very often it's the small business that's relying upon those, and there will be alternatives if the post office doesn't get their ass in gear.
Basically, that's it.
Because what will happen is, okay, so I talked about the move, $13 versus $39. If the UPS store were to reduce the price to $25, I'd be going there every day.
Well, if suddenly the registered mail is no longer available from Canada Post, then obviously there'll be more of it and they can reduce their prices. I don't think so, because UPS is part of the capitalist swine, so they'll probably up it. You can't get it through Canada Post anymore, so I charge you even more. So that's supply and demand basically isn't there.
I know. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can wrap this up pretty quick. That's basically we've hit this every side going. Yeah. Basically.
And I love the capitalist swine.
They might shoot themselves in the foot, basically.
Yeah. And I love the capitalist swine comments, great. We had to see it from every angle there. All right. So we're kind of we've kind of run it. Well, we've got a minute to go. We're running out of time on here. Anything else that you want to talk about? That's a quick story. Oh, okay.
Okay, what?
Okay, there's a new flying ride that opens this summer in Niagara Falls.
Tell us all about that.
Well, that's interesting because basically what I'm not entirely sure what it is, because they're basically saying it's going to be a multi-sensory flying theater, the first of its kind that offers you views you can't find anywhere else. Right, so it's going to be, I think it's going to be exactly where the some of the earlier other theaters have been, but the floor's going to vibrate and things like this. So you're going to feel the motion of flying.
It's a simulated thing, right?
Yeah, it's simulated. Yeah, and it's going to be dubbed Niagara Takes Flight. And the experience will be give unparalleled views of over the falls surrounding parkland in a way that makes you feel you're actually flying through the air. So I would imagine that probably what they're doing is a lot of helicopter, a lot of helicopters flying to take these panoramic views of the entire gorge, and translating that into a cinematic experience.
Yes. Well, nothing like coming to the falls and looking at the falls from inside a dome. I mean, why, come to the falls and experience the falls from inside this ride. Yeah. Like, why don't you just go down there and look at it? There's the falls over there, but I get it. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be like you're in a helicopter or something. You're going to be swooping around. So they've added a lot of.
You think about it. Some people can't afford the $75 or more bucks for the helicopter ride.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't know how much this is going to cost, though. I bet you this is Niagara Falls, so they're going to squeeze the tourists for every last nickel. So I don't know how much it's going to cost.
Yeah.
If the helicopter rides $50, they'll make this one $45. You know?
Yeah. Well, no, last I heard, I knew the helicopter ride was about 8 years ago. The helicopter was about $75. I think it's gone up to about 100, 110 now. I could be wrong.
Well, these particular rides, if you want to call them rides, because of the computer power and AI and all of that, they can be developed enormously well. I remember once I was at some place, I can't remember it where it was. I think maybe one of the science centers or something, where you got into a seat and there was a film and the seats moved and they go up and down, and you can really feel as if you're diving down. It's like a plane ride or something, like you're, and it really was a lot of sensation. That was a very old one. Imagine what they are now.
Yeah.
With all the AI and stuff they can apply to this, they could really, really make it realistic, very realistic. So I'm looking forward to it. If I could sneak in there for free, I will.
There was one that there was one in England whereby you sat in your seat and it was like sitting in a church pew, right? And they said, buckle yourself down, and looking around and going, how the hell am I going to buckle myself down?
Yeah.
Because then they turn the entire building around you.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So it felt as if you were swinging like a swing, up and down, because what they did was move the building. So what was there suddenly went down and up and down and up. And suddenly then the skies skies underneath you and the ground's above you.
Sure, these are optical tricks that they use, and they know how to deceive your
and you actually feel it because they probably vibrate the chairs as part of it, right?
Yeah. So anyway, I think it'd be probably pretty worth it to try it out. And I don't know.
And they're basically saying is that you can experience 56 kilometers of the Niagara River through this simulated trip.
And it'll provide a lot of work for laid off postal workers.
Which we know is coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly hope they don't go on strike. They got to find a better way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
even though I'm with them, like I'm a union guy, and but at this point I would advise them against using that strike. I mean, if there was a safety issue or something like that, yeah, definitely. But remember who you're hurting when you go on strike.
And when it's over money, you see, when it's over money, public patience wears thin very, very quickly.
Yeah, and also, but a lot of it has to do with staying power too. Are they going to get laid off? Job security, things of that kind. Of course, that's aching. And in the old days, when you want to strike, you hurt big business, right? So big business would put pressure on the government to solve the union, right? Because the strike, because big business was hurting. But now big business don't hurt. Small businesses and the average person is the one that hurts.
Yeah.
So when you go on strike, you're not targeting people of power. Basically, you're so that's.
I would say at work we get 10 letters a week, if that.
10 letters a week. Okay.
Some weeks we get nothing.
No, I feel forgotten, except during times of election, and I get the card from Wayne Gates or Baldinelli or something. Oh, you didn't forget me. Oh,
yeah, and that's the truth of the matter. Is it's about the only time you get the postage, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think we're kind of concluded the show today because we're just
absolutely
right back to the postal strike and the ride to the postal strike and back again. So we're running out of information that we can use because we only have a couple of minutes. So, anyways, without further ado, I bid you adieu. Do not forget Gaza. I hope Jeffrey Sachs was right that there is end in sight. We'll see about that. But anyway, don't forget Gaza. It's getting worse all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's starving kids there. That's all I can say.
Yeah. So.
All right.